right. I am live. Okay.
All right, I'm going to start my Facebook Live. If you're good to go.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Watch live now. Pharisee Heresy.
There we go. All
Love
right.
it. It's about to start here on Facebook.
Double trouble. We have no idea what we're doing.
This should be fun. All right, we are live on Facebook and YouTube right now. So I'm going to pop this down and we're going to go for it. Welcome to the Pharisee Heresy podcast with Dr. Nathaniel Klein and Dr. Daniel Vaden. How's it going, Dr. Nate?
Welcome, welcome. Very good to be back. Just trying to pull up my own
So while
Pharisee
you're
heresy
pulling,
here.
Yeah, while you're pulling it up, I'll do a quick catch up on where we left off. We went over the two witnesses and identified who the two witnesses were last time. And the two witnesses represent the office of king and priest, and they represent the Messiah, and they represent the ecclesia, or the called out ones, the church, so to say. And so the two witnesses in Revelation chapter 11 represent the body of Christ, the ecclesia. And so as we discussed the letters to the seven churches, we got to a point now where we're ready to start opening up the seals. But before the seals are opened up, we'll just start off with a little bit of context. Do you have anything that you wanted to share from last time, Nate, or any recap points you wanted to
I was trying to
bring up?
remember about you were talking about the two menorahs, right? Menorahs in Revelation
Yeah, two
11.
menorahs in Revelation. Mm-hmm.
I think you said one was, what did you say it was? Oh, they were the
Well,
Christ's coming, first and second coming. Is that correct?
yeah, and this is just a Danielism, just an
Danielism.
opinion.
I like it.
Yeah, of like what it could be. It could, because it's not, to my knowledge, explicitly laid out. Zechariah had a vision of two olive branches and one menorah, and then John had a vision of two olive branches and two menorahs. So my contention is that perhaps it's because, you know, uh, Daniel had a vision, or Zechariah had a vision pertaining to the first coming of Messiah. Well, John witnessed the first coming of Messiah, and so John is given further revelation about the second coming of Messiah. So perhaps maybe that's why he sees two lampstands in his vision, and that's just a theory of mine. Um,
Do you hear my laptop having a freak out?
I do not hear your
Okay.
laptop having a
I'm
freak out.
slowly inching away because it's stressing
Is it gonna
itself
blow
out
up?
here. I just don't want people to hear the the
Yeah.
whole okay.
No, you're
Okay.
clear on this
All
end.
right. The
So,
fan is going. So if you see me inching, that's
ah,
okay.
yes. So yeah, I mean, when we talk about the six seals, you know, this chapter goes through the six seals pretty quickly, and then chapter 7 deals with the 144,000 that were sealed from every tribe of the 12 tribes. And then after that, you get the six trumpets, and then follow that, you get the seven trumpets, seven bowls of wrath. Um, and this is all bringing judgment upon the beast, the Roman beast system. And at this point in time, it's the Roman Empire. It's not a papal Roman Empire, because papal Rome doesn't really become a thing until the late fourth century, and we will see that develop as we go, and the transition, the evolution. So you really have these seals poured out upon imperial Rome, and then you have the trumpets poured out upon papal Rome during the time of the medieval period and Renaissance period, and then you have the bowls poured out as we transition into the modern age, as far as history is concerned. So you really kind of hit, three different periods here
So we're
at a
in for a
minimum.
lot of history. Is that what you're saying?
Lots of history. Revelation is going to take us all the way up to modern day. And, I feel like the listener will be convinced, maybe not convinced, but at least intrigued to look further after today as we examine the first six seals and see how do these seals line up in history. Because futurists, when they read about the seals and the trumpets and the bowls, they try to interpret the passage oftentimes based on like current headlines. So Trump got shot in the ear. Okay, that must be the deadly head wound of the
Right.
beast, or whatever it might be.
I feel like that's
But
the
all those,
Jonathan Cahn's like thing too. He's like, all right, let's make everything modern day. Like, oh, this happened to Isaiah and Jezebel, and it's like you're just making it fit. Why don't you predict something future, sir?
yeah. And in order to do that, you have to rip it out of its context too, and make it a singular event that's not connected to the whole passage as a whole.
That's our problem in America
Um,
too. It's like prophecy is always about America. It's like we're a small cog in the wheel. I feel, especially
yeah,
when you start
definitely a
bringing
small
it
cog.
towards Rome and the papacy. It's like that's the
Hmm.
central focus, and I'm sure we'll be brought into that.
Yeah, we basically have three major players. Well, kind of four. Okay, so what you have is imperial Rome, which is the secular uh, political authority or empire, upon which the woman or the prostitute of Babylon rides. And so you have another way of looking at it is you have the beast from the sea and you have the beast from the earth. And so the beast from the sea is representing Rome and Roman Empire, and then the beast from the earth represents the papacy. And then you've got the other two players are um, you've got believers who believe in Yeshua, they hold to the testimony of Yeshua, and they keep the commandments of God. And then you have the Gentiles who are not following God, but what they are is basically they become you're either in one of two kingdoms. You're either in God's kingdom or you're in Satan's kingdom. So if you're Israel, you're part of God's kingdom. If you're a Gentile or of the nations, it means that you belong to the world, the nations as a whole. So you're part of that beast kingdom. But there's another player here that kind of gets overlooked or thrown in the mud, and that's the Jews, the Jewish people. And because they hold on to the testimony of the Torah, they hold on to the testimony of a Messiah, even though they missed the Messiah. But what I found really interesting, and this is kind of to give you just like this meta narrative, looking at the end of what we should expect to see next, where we are right now in the end of the sixth bowl, going into the seventh bowl. So we're basically approaching Armageddon. So what we expect to see is Zechariah 12 through 14 play out.
I'm
And
ready to get it on.
yeah, Zechariah 12 through 14, it doesn't say that all nations come against Israel. It's a funny thing because that's kind of what we think. But it says all nations will come against Jerusalem and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And it says that God will save and refine through the fire a third of the inhabitants, and they will look on the one whom they have pierced and mourn for him as an only son. So what this tells me, when Zechariah 12 through 14 plays out, it's centered around a nation, a city, filled with Jewish people who have not recognized their Messiah yet, but who will be refined by the fire and shown Messiah. So we shouldn't just discount them as a player here, because they are a central player.
My mom's in Israel right now. She just took a tour over.
Oh, that's awesome. Hopefully it's very fruitful
Yes.
and they're safe.
Yeah.
So peace be unto her. She's going to have a great time, I'm sure. I love Israel, man. I got to go back. Got to go back one day.
I just want the
You want to get in?
falafel.
Yes, the falafel
No, yeah. The only thing I was
swim.
thinking about when you're talking, as something we kind of said last time, were the different. We got the beast system. You got the ecclesia, and then the Jews are the third. And I feel like, especially right now, everyone's just focused on like the liberals, and like there's just a distraction. It's like the
Hmm.
Antichrist comes from like a Christian religious understanding. Like even
Right.
like I was watching I think Mike Winger was doing on the Pope, just like things the Pope is saying, like Pope Francis, just like making everything like kosher with the Muslims, and he's just trying to like,
Yes.
it's like
I
your
saw
God is
this.
God and my God is God, and yeah, it's all the same God. It's like okay, it's not okay.
Just a couple weeks ago, it was very ecumenical, or even further than ecumenical. It was one world religion esque. He's basically saying that all religions lead to God. And so he's even being blasted by a lot of Catholics, and a lot of Catholic apologists are trying to make excuses for what he said. And
A lot of
it's
Catholics
kind of
are
a,
very very smart people.
yes, they are. Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
They bring a
They're
lot
very
of good
smart.
research articles out there for me to read.
Yes, and the encouragement from the scriptures is come out of her, my people. So there's a lot of people in the Babylonian system that love God, follow God, and just need to come out of those practices. And this, yes, it applies primarily to the apostate church of Rome, but we got to remember that Protestantism, it was a branch off of the apostate Roman church, and most the Protestant beliefs still carry a whole lot of those uh, false belief systems. Like changing the Sabbath to Sunday to the Lord's Day, and getting rid of God's feast days, and even the substantiation. I think Lutherans believe in, but there's a lot of things that the Protestants didn't protest enough. They didn't reform enough. So it's not necessarily it's just a stamp of approval on anything Protestant if we're speaking negatively about Catholicism. It's really about identifying Babylon and a contrast between the commandments of God and holding to the testimony of Yeshua versus a religion that attempts to usurp that position of authority. Um, anyways, I could
Yes,
drone on about that, but do you want to get into the seals and have some fun?
yes. Sorry.
All
Continue
right,
to the
we
fun.
are going to identify the six seals
I'm a fun
tonight.
sucker.
This will be fun. Um, so let's see. I will. We talk about not trying to interpret these seals based on the current headlines. If you're a futurist, that tends to be what you do. If you're a preterist,
It's a good way
you
to
don't
sell
really even.
books.
Yeah, a great way to sell books. If you're a
Harbinger and
preterist, you can
Shemitah.
sell you can sell your preterist position by simply telling people, well, they don't have to figure it all out because it already happened. So no need to even read it or figure it all out. And, you'll never figure it all out. It's all allegorized, spiritualized. Didn't even happen. Especially if you're a material preterist and you believe we've already gone through the millennium. So
John
yeah.
was just
So
smoking the good weed.
yes. But if you want to be a Berean, you need to put in the hard work of study and discern the context, and ascertain the most accurate interpretation possible. We don't want to just rely upon our own imaginations of our heart. And something that will come out of this that will be very helpful is when you understand this, you know, and then you hear somebody come on and say, "Well, guys, I just saw the sixth trumpet, and the Euphrates River is drying up. You can see in or God told me the fourth trumpet was just poured out, or the you can be sure and know that God is not speaking to that person. If they're making claims that God revealed this to them, once you understand and have a good grasp of this position. So my
There's
hope
so
is
many
is that
prophets out there right now. They should be
oh yeah,
recording everything they say and adding it to the Bible, right? They should have a really big
yes,
Bible here.
yes, yes, especially if it's that kind of a prophecy, like, oh guys, God just showed me the sixth trumpet. Okay, that's not something that you know that's for you and your buddy. That's like a major prophecy, you should be writing this down, and everybody, it should be scripture now. But anyways, let's look at the context of the Roman world in the first century that the Christians lived in John's day. The symbols and metaphors that are written should match commonly understood symbols of the time, and they should match the scriptures, the prophets of old. So what I want to do first is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to give you this chart. And can you see that chart okay?
Yes. It's a beautiful chart.
There, that's probably better.
Seals of Revelation.
All right, that's the best I'm going to do. So now you can see we're going to show you all the 7 seals. And did we talk about what the seals are with the Jeremiah and the... Yeah, we did. We talked about the jars of clay, the title deed to the earth that was lost at the fall of mankind. So she was opening these seals up. The first seal is the time of Pax Romana, or peace in the Roman Empire. And that's from 96 to 180. And then the second seal is a time of civil war. So you have the white horse, the red horse, you have the black horse of economic turmoil, and you have the pale horse of famine and pestilence. So the first 4 trumpets are all very closely connected, and the second through fourth are just lumped together into this time period of 180 to 284 because there's a lot of overlap between them. And then the 5th trumpet is the Diocletianic martyrdom from 303 to 313. It's a 10-year period. It's the worst martyrdom of Christianity to that point. And then you have the 6th seal of terror and restructuring the entire Western Roman Empire. And then the 7th trumpet, you have a short period of silence followed by, the 7th seal, you have a short period of silence, which introduces the 7 trumpets, which are then followed by the 7 bowls. So, yeah, the 7th seal opens all the rest of the stuff up. And so that I place from 395 until the greater apocalypse, which is the second coming of Christ. So I kind of coined this idea of Christ's first coming and the destruction in 70 is like the lesser apocalypse. It's the shadow picture of this final apocalypse that will occur in the future. So I kind of just called that the greater apocalypse. So is that pretty clear so far?
Makes sense. Clear
as
mud.
For tonight?
Yep. Next time.
Hope you guys all believe me and buy into this now. I'm just kidding. I just hope
I
that
was
you
just thinking
test
about the horses again and Zechariah and how they kind of mirror. I think when I first went through Zechariah, I was trying to match them up. I'm like, it's the same horse. No, it's just showing different time periods, right? So Zechariah's horses would have been revolving around the Persian Empire and the coming of Greece and all that. And now this is talking about something completely different.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And it's not that God can't use the same horses over again, or that they don't represent the same angels, maybe.
Right, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
We may never know. But certainly different, things were happening. All right, so let's get into the first seal. And let's see if I have the...
In that futurist camp, you just have that mindset. It's like everything has to be future.
Yeah, everything.
It can't be happening right now.
Right. Let me fix this. That's what I did. That's why. That's going to be better. Okay. I'll pop over here to Revelation 6.
I was watching Prophecy Bingo, and Chris Rosenberg was singing a song. He's like, I bet you think the Bible's about you, don't you?
That's great.
That's perfect. That a lot of people take.
So let's see.
About me.
Let's see. Let's do Prophecy Bingo. Is the first seal, the white horse, about the 2024 Olympics, or is it about the Roman Empire in,
Well, Jesus spoke to me, and I think he said... I love when they say that. I think. You misheard the Lord?
Yeah. Well, let's
said
go
which
back.
prophet ever?
All right, so I wash as the lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say in a thunderous voice, "Come." So I looked and saw a white horse, and its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out to overcome and to conquer. So I kind of did this with some friends earlier and asked them, what is the left behind version of this verse?
Let's
All right.
see.
So what is, if you had to look at this like you're a futurist, or what would you hear on the headlines or the Instagrams, and you read this verse, how would you interpret?
I think it's the white horse. Jesus, right? He's
Yeah.
coming back.
Okay. Yeah, because he's gonna got to be on a white horse, you
That's
know.
why I was confused. Like he comes back to rapture us, then he comes back later to conquer and judge.
All right.
Is this the third and fourth coming? How many comings are there?
Yeah. And apparently, he's only given a crown when he comes on the horse. Um, Rode out to overcome and conquer. All right. So now, what if you were trying to use symbolism from historical context and maybe previous prophecy? Then how would you look at this passage? It's still tough, but
So white
give it a shot.
horse would be peace, right? He's coming in
Okay,
peace.
yeah, peace.
Um, bow, king.
Okay,
I don't know. Is he good?
crown, king.
Archers.
Yeah,
He's got lots of
yeah,
archers.
right. Yes, archers.
Oh,
So now,
some Roman artillery.
what if I told you that a Roman triumph is a commonly known phenomenon in which a Roman emperor or a general. I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. So there, so you can see me better. What if I told you that a Roman triumph is when a general or a an emperor rides into a town after a victory in war and is greeted by the entire town with great, fanfare.
Let me guess. He's got a
And
crown on and a bow.
yeah, so he would wear a garland, so a crown. That word there can be garland, where it's like that leaf crown, symbolizing peace and victory. And he rides on a white horse. So if you're a Roman general or emperor, you just won in battle, you present yourself to the town after scoring a victory, you're wearing a garland on a white horse. Now, a bow is a little bit more subjective because you wouldn't necessarily have to have a bow. You could say a sword or a spear, or, a shield or whatnot. So, what's interesting though is during this time period, you have a sequence of events of five emperors in a row, known as the Good Emperors. All historians call them the Good Emperors of Rome, starting with Nerva. And Nerva was a Cretan. I believe he was the first Cretan Roman emperor. And Cretans are known for their archers. So it very well could be that the bow is simply pointing to the fact that this is a time in history, the best period in Roman history, the most expansion in the Roman Empire, and most victory and prosperity, beginning with a Cretan emperor. So this would occur right after, what do we talk about? Right after you see the scene in heaven. So this is 96 CE where John is given this vision. So I'm going to pull up my notes here. So Nerva, let's see if I have the
How did he come to
history.
power?
Oh, that's a good question. It's been months since I've.
Because the other five, were they all Cretans?
So the other five were not all Cretans in the sense of born a Cretan, because from this point on, Nerva started doing adoptive succession. So the emperor started a practice of adopting a son who would become their successor rather than a natural born son. So, um,
That'd be rough if we're natural born.
yeah. And so actually, you would say then, if you're adopted into his family, that would also make you a Cretan to one degree. But they all essentially came from this Cretan emperor. At least he started it. Okay, and so uh,
I remember Josephus was adopted in a similar fashion
oh, okay,
by
yeah.
Vespasian.
So the
I don't know
I
if
didn't
that was to
remember
be
that.
emperor, but probably not.
Right,
Just he was considered
right,
family.
yeah. So the next five consecutive emperors of Rome are Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, and they're known as the five good emperors of Rome. It's known as the most prosperous, peaceful, and expansive period in Roman history. Now I'm going to share my screen again, show you a couple things, and okay. So the first five of these was Nerva, who was the first Cretan emperor. They were known for their infamous bowmen, thus the symbolism of the bow. The Nerva Antonine dynasty consists of seven emperors of Rome: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius, Marcus Aurelius, Lucius Verus, and Commodus. Now, Nerva adopted Trajan in order to groom him for the role of emperor, and this was practiced until Aurelius' successor and natural-born son, Commodus. These five good emperors of Rome are therefore also known as the adoptive emperors, all adopted into the line of their Cretan predecessor, Nerva. So this practice stopped when you get to Commodus, who was the bad guy in Gladiator,
I was going to
right?
say, I mean, it makes that movie more interesting because he did try to
Yes.
adopt Maximus to
Right.
be emperor. Like that was a thing. I didn't realize that's a thing. So that gives that a little more
Yeah,
weight
it does.
historically. Interesting.
It really does. And so, you know, laurel wreath crowns symbolize victory. We kind of talked about this. So this imagery is a typical Roman triumph led by a Cretan emperor, and that's what you see happening in this time period. Now, just to verify, because I didn't throw it up there with my notes, if we look up when was Nerva emperor, you're going to see 96 to 98. So that's the exact same year John received this vision. So the first smack dab, right in your face thing to happen that John has shown is, well, here you go. Here's your Cretan emperor. And I'm going to show you successively what happens after this. So just to give you a little bit more to chew on.
Because of credibility for the audience of the time, too.
Right.
Because they would be alive to actually see a few of these things unfold and be like, okay, so you got a few right, so the rest is probably on par.
Right. I'm not doing well with my computer management here. Okay.
It's beautiful. You're doing all the work.
There we go. All right. Can you see these coins okay?
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, on these coins, you can see, yeah, here's coin of Trajan, and here's Marcus Aurelius. So you can see them doing a triumph right here. I picked these guys because it's a really good image of the coin, and they were probably the more successful of them, especially Trajan. The emperor was most expansive under Trajan. You can see the laurel crown, the wreath right here, and you can see the triumph right here. Again, there's the laurel wreath and the triumph.
Really
So
making
now
me
we
want to
have,
go watch Gladiator.
yes, yes. So now we have archaeological numismatic evidence of the symbolism occurring at that time, which matches with the description
We've all
of the
seen
first
it
seal.
too. It's like you've watched a
Right.
movie.
We've watched a movie, you
You've
know.
seen Gladiator.
It doesn't have to be the 2024 Olympic ceremony with some weird, thing going on, or
Good description.
doesn't have to be Pegasus coming down in the sky. Yeah, so that was the the Pax Romana, this
Well,
time of peace in the Roman Empire. So then we'll get to the second seal.
and it's odd because it says he came to conquer, but it was peaceful conquering.
Yeah, so,
It's like Cyrus the Great had to conquer Babylon and to bring
yep.
peace to 150 some provinces,
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
known
so it
world.
was, and the Romans did a pretty good job, especially during this time, of ruling their subordinates. They didn't just crush everybody. They provided infrastructure, and um, so people were, I think, pretty happy, pretty peaceful. At least that's why they call them the good emperors. Now, that's not to say there weren't horrible things that were happening, because there were persecutions of Christians that were happening.
Right.
Especially, I think Hadrian, I think Trajan might have done some. Definitely Marcus Aurelius. So
And when did you say the good emperors end? What year?
that would have been
I was just
um,
thinking about the Bar Kokhba
with
rebellion,
Commodus. So
130.
96 to 180.
Okay.
Yeah. So now it doesn't mean things were necessarily great for God's people, but they were
Well, they
great.
shouldn't
They
have
were good
been.
for the
Bar
empire.
Kokhba was a false messiah, and those
Right.
Jews shouldn't have been rallying behind him, anyways.
True. So now we're going to get to a period of civil war. So
That reminds me so
before
much
I,
of like when they first, the Israelites first go into land of Canaan, and nobody talks about this story because they're like the 12 spies come back and they're like, "Oh no, no, don't go in," and like God's like, "All right, then you got to go wander," and then they try, but they don't tell you they go and they try it, and Moses is like, "Well, I'm not going with you," and they get like destroyed. It's like they missed Messiah. They're like, "Oh, let's stand behind the next one that shows up
right,
because we didn't follow that last one."
that's a good point. Yep.
It's like it's too late.
Yep.
Slow
Just,
obedience is no obedience.
uh huh. Yep. So, all right, so we'll hit the second seal. When the Lamb opened the second seal, this is Revelation 6:3, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And another horse went forth. It was bright red, and its rider was granted permission to take away peace from the earth and to make men slay one another. And he was given a great sword. All right, what's the Left Behind version? What's the futurist version of this?
We're
Um,
reading the second seal here.
yeah, second seal.
Another horse went forth. It was red. I forget what red means. I'm thinking Zechariah here. I'm guessing war.
Yeah,
Take away peace, of course, from the
blood.
earth, and to make men slay one another. Um, I don't know, some Nicolay Carpathia stuff going on, and
Yeah.
tribulation time, and
I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. You're making men slay one another sounds almost like berserkers, like just madly slaying each other. But another way to see this is just it means civil war. They're slaying each other, and they're slaying their own people. Um, and he's given a great sword. So it's actually kind of straightforward. Um, the only problem is if you try to interpret this hyper literally and think that there's a red horse that comes out of the sky. But remember, this is a vision of something in heaven. So a picture of something in heaven, illustrating the effect it has on the earth, which is taking peace away. So Pax Romana is over. You would expect if you're taking peace away, now we should see the period that follows Pax Romana, this great period of peace in the empire.
I
And
could
remember
see
that
them being
word
like, "What's
earth.
communism? It's red. It's the Soviets, the Russians, and it's
Yeah.
China causing these civil
Why
wars."
look for a futurist interpretation when it's right here in front of us, starting in the very same time period that John was given it? So John in 96 says, okay, here's a period of peace, victory for the empire, and followed by a period of civil war for the empire. All right, so now let's take a look at the interpretation portion, and we'll see. So here's the time frame, 180 to 284. The seal depicts a period of immense civil war and chaos that follows the previous time of peace. Emperor Commodus, who reigned 180 to 192, was a vicious dictator, and found his end when he was assassinated by Narcissus and then declared to be a public enemy by the Senate. I believe Narcissus was actually a gladiator or
Hmm.
something, or a trainer for gladiators or something like that. So, anyways, um, and he was declared to be a public enemy by the Senate, so they didn't like him. Following his death in 192 was a year in which 5 men claimed the title of Roman emperor.
Sounds like a
Um,
great sequel to Gladiator. Is that the what they're doing?
I don't know. I kind of hope so. It'd be pretty cool. So 193 became known as the year of the 5 emperors, and then when there are 5 emperors claiming the throne, you're going to have civil war. Um, by the end of this tumultuous year, a guy named Septimius Severus was the final contender to
Severus
seize
Snape.
power.
Sorry.
Yes, Severus. That's good. Um, and he claimed the throne. So there's your civil war. Okay. So now let's go back. Any questions or concerns on that one?
I'm concerned about Septimus Severus sounding very much like a Harry Potter character.
Yeah. Maybe they're going to combine Gladiator
I'm
with Harry
seeing where
Potter.
she's getting her writing material.
All right, the third seal. Um, Interesting that in the Berean Standard Bible, the translator adds a title, the third seal, famine. Like they tell you, oh, this means famine. Well, let's read it. Um, Verse 5, I looked and saw a black horse, and its rider held in his hand a pair of scales. And I heard what sounded like a voice from among the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine. All right, where does your mind go when we first read through this?
I'm thinking famine, and I'm thinking like, well, why is it a denarius? It's like, oh, John's just using monetary terms, and he didn't know what money looked like in the future.
Right, that's a good point.
Were they still been using the denarii? Those
Yes.
coins are showing they're denariuses, right? Or
Yeah.
some sort of
Yeah. So that's a great point.
denarii.
Is
What's the plural?
this dates it? This dates it to that time period. If he's seeing a denarius, now, yeah, like you said, it could just be, oh, John seeing a picture of money, and that's what. Well, okay, well then he could have been shown gold or silver, and not in a denarius form. But the other thing he sees is the 3 main agricultural crops of the empire as well: wheat, barley, so the grains, and then the oil and wine. So he didn't say things that we might say today that are our main crops, might be corn or soy or whatever it might be. Avocados on avocado toast was this much.
They're already too
It's
expensive.
right. So we're already given a clue to the time period in just the language that's being used here as well. And a pair of scales. I mean, I don't think this was a digital scale or anything like that. I think this was a pair of scales that, one side. So, all right. So
If
now
wine
let's
was
just look
cheap,
at,
I would just live off that, man. You get your calories from there.
get your calories, plenty of calories. So now let's just kind of read about that. Time frame 180 to 284. And it's a black horse, if you remember. So Roman agriculture centered around 3 most important crops: grains, olives, and grapes. The same cannot be so easily said in today's global economy. A denarius was 1 day's wages for a soldier or common laborer. A quart of wheat is enough to feed a man for 1 day, and 3 quarts of barley, which was an inferior grain so it was cheaper, would feed his entire family for a day. So what this phrase is seemingly saying is that there would be a significant economic distress that would entail, causing the need for budgeting and creative ways to finance Rome's armies. So the horsemen would essentially limit this economic distress to 1 day's wages being able to buy the bare necessities of life. And so it wasn't so bad that you couldn't survive. You could still feed your family, and do not harm the oil and wine. So not everything was affected drastically, but it was enough to where you're the oil and the wine, maybe those are a little bit more luxuries anyways, and except for what you would need for the baking. But the point is, a day's wages for a Roman soldier would be able to feed yourself wheat or your family barley. So be able to get by, but it would be tough times.
Yeah, so our
So we should,
variety today is so massive. But,
right? Yeah,
we just
it's hard to even
assume, I guess, in
comprehend
the
that.
future is only just speaking kind of metaphorical for all crops.
Right, right. So it's kind of harder to be a futurist when you read it this way
Back
now.
then, like even the Jewish feast days, like I think Passover is barley harvest and Shavuot is wheat harvest. Everything's centered around like these two crops. They're like,
Yeah, yeah. And Sukkot is going to be your grape and wine harvest
right,
too.
fall harvest.
Yeah. So following Commodus's death in the year of the five emperors, Septimius Severus began buying the loyalty of the military through increased pay and substantially increased the size of the armed forces. Now, to do this, he diluted the coinage, and that created a precedent for future emperors, leading to hyperinflation eventually. So the relationship between the emperor and the army began to shift to the point that now divine succession could no longer be assumed to be sufficient to garner the loyalty of the armed forces. It wasn't that you could just, succeed the throne and claim to be Augustus or God. Now, Rome would see the rise of the barracks emperors who came from and were raised to power by the army. So it was kind of like this population contest within the army of the emperors that they actually trusted. And so the first of which was Maximinus Thrax. Maybe that's what the next Gladiator is going to be about. That could be cool. And there were many more to follow. And this led
I was
up
just thinking
to,
if they had the Commodus character again, they could bring that actor back. What's his name? As like an older
yeah,
character. I'm like, that'd be cool.
that would be cool. Joaquin Phoenix as
Joaquin
an older
Phoenix,
guy.
yes, yes.
Yeah, but they already killed him in Gladiator. If you
Oh
remember,
yeah,
it was actually, yeah.
forgot that.
I think it was Maximus that did it.
Right.
Yeah.
Never
So
mind. What a
so
terrible
maybe he didn't
Ridley
quite follow
Scott
history
fan here.
perfectly. Yeah.
Because he
So
dies later.
I don't think they'll be bringing him back. But anyways, so this led up to the crisis of the third century, also known as the Imperial Crisis from 235 to 284. And this time was characterized by repeated barbarian invasions, civil wars, peasant rebellions, political instability, and economic disintegration. During this period of almost 50 years, there were 26 claimants to the title of emperor. And with the need for larger and better paid armies fighting on multiple fronts against these barbarians, it would increase cost of transport, deficient tax collection, and the emperors began confiscating assets and supplies and implementing heavy taxes. This fell mostly on affecting the lower class, especially the farmers. And it was common for Rome to impose taxes on commodities such as grain, olive oil, wine, and salt. Now, to finish this history, the civil unrest made it unsafe for merchants to travel, which led to a breakdown in the internal trade network. Now, city dwellers would be forced to take up residency on large farming estates and work the land to produce local crops, which could be traded and bartered. This bartering system was especially necessary due to now debased currency. And this actually was kind of a mini model leading up to the manorialism and feudal society of the Middle Ages that we see later. By the end of the 3rd century, so late 200s, the old Roman coinage had almost no value, and trade was carried out without it. So you do see this happening, political, economic instability occurring during this time period. And a lot of the farmers actually had to abandon some of their farms because of raids from barbarians, and or move in and hire guards. So that's what you see in the third seal. Questions on
I
that
was
one?
just wondering when Attila shows up, man. I'm hearing about the
Oh,
raids, so
yes. Attila's going to be. Oh man, we got to get to the trumpets to get to Attila.
Oh,
So we're almost there though. All right, so now the fourth seal. Uh,
because
we're
he
going to
shows
read
up near the
verse.
end of the Roman Empire, right?
Yes. Yep. I looked and saw a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second, just for fun. Its rider's name was Death. Um, and Hades followed close behind. And they were given authority over a fourth the earth, to kill by sword, by famine, by plague, and by the beasts of the earth. All right, what do you got here so far?
And I don't know.
I know it's kind of crazy. You got Death riding this horse, Hades following close behind. I mean, you look at this from a futurist view, and you got to have like the Grim Reaper
Right.
on a black horse, you know. Um,
I don't know what the Black Plague was or anything like that, but it sounds bubonic plague level.
all right, yeah, I think you're on the right track there. And he says, authority over a fourth of the earth. So we know the earth is referring to the Roman Empire. So a fourth of the Roman Empire to be affected by sword, famine, plague, and beasts of the earth. So let's take a look at how this could have played out. Um, I'll share with you a little bit. The first of the plagues was the Antonine Plague, and it was the first plague, first known pandemic of the Roman Empire. So this is big. If this is the first known
Antonine.
pandemic, it's kind of Antonine, yes. Um, Here, I can share my screen if that's easier. That way you can see me read, which may be more boring, but there you have it. First known pandemic of the Roman Empire
You just don't
from
want me reading ahead,
165
do
to
you?
180. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more exciting if you're not reading from a page, but I guess it's
I'm staying with you.
more
I'm
helpful.
staying with you. I'm not reading ahead.
All right, all right.
I'm not going to cheat.
No cheating. So this happened the last years of the golden age of Rome, and broke out again with more potency 9 years later in 189. They say about 2,000 people died per day in Rome during this
Yes.
outbreak. So total death count is estimated around 10% of the entire Roman Empire's population. That's huge. That's way more than COVID. Uh, so I'm allowed to even say that online anymore. But it was believed to have been something similar to smallpox or measles. So then you
I
have
had
a
patients
little bit
canceling
later,
the other day because they have COVID. It's like, it's still around. It's
still around. It's the
because
flu,
it's
you
the
guys.
flu.
So now you got the plague of Cyprian, which took place from 251 to 270, and is believed to have been something similar to the Ebola virus or maybe smallpox. So at the height, it said that in Rome, 5,000 people per day was dying. This caused a widespread shortage of manpower to make food and supply the army, and that weakened the empire during this crisis, making them more susceptible to the impending barbarian raids that would shortly ensue. Now, with the loss of manpower, the raids became more of a threat. Many farms were abandoned or unproductive, which led to famine. Um, Now, also, if you have abandoned land left untilled, what happens? Well, now you have the wild animals that start to live in those areas and repopulate them, which they preyed on human life as well. So now you've got famine that's affected you, economic crisis. You've got barbarians. You've the sword. You've got wild beasts, um, and you've got plague. So it's hitting all these markers here that we see of authority over a fourth of the earth, sword, famine, plague, and beasts of the earth. All right. Um, so interestingly, we see this language used prior in Ezekiel 14:21. God is talking about judgment upon Israel and Judah, and Ezekiel prophesied 4 dire judgments that God would bring. Here's what they are. How much worse will it be when I send against Jerusalem my 4 dire judgments, sword, famine, wild beast, and plague, in order to cut it off from both man and beast? It's not a novel concept. It's kind of the modus operandi. These
Modus
4 dire
operandi.
judgments. So there you have it. So yeah, there's other passages that also mention this. If you want to check them out, Ezekiel 5:17, Jeremiah 27:8, and 2 Samuel 24:13. But we won't look at them now. So
Wild
this
beasts would be more
period,
dangerous back then, anyways.
oh
Or yeah,
yeah,
now everyone's got shotgun ready.
yeah, we think about like if I'm
Where's
in
the
Tennessee and
swords,
think
right?
about what's the wild beast that's going to get me. All right, there's a coyote in the woods, But like if I'm in Alaska,
I did see
you
a
know,
very large opossum the other day.
yeah, exactly. So yeah. Um, all right, so that spanned about 92 years from Commodus' death to the rise of Emperor Diocletian, and he's credited with ending the crisis. So now we're going to go back and we're going to look at the fifth seal, which is entitled The Martyrs. So we hit the time of Diocletian, and now we're going to get this. The Lamb opened the fifth seal. I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony they had upheld. And they cried out in a loud voice, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you avenge our blood and judge those who dwell upon the earth? Then each of them was given a white robe and told to rest a little while longer, until the full number of their fellow servants, their brothers, were killed, just as they had been killed.
So
So now we,
the Left Behind would say this is people have been raptured, and then people are going to heaven, and then this whole scene is taking place in heaven.
this must be, these are souls that had been slain. So perhaps a tribulation, like, description of what they believe to maybe be this 3.5 year tribulation. So I believe that narrative goes like this. They believe that the Daniel's final week will consist of 7 years, and the first 3.5 years will be the Antichrist having a covenant of peace, and the Jewish temple will be operating, which is why everybody's excited about these red heifers, because they believe that the Jewish temple has to be operating for the Antichrist to then desecrate it and break his covenant of peace after 3.5 years. And that's when this final 3.5 year tribulation begins, the rapture, and all the Christians are gone, and then there's the tribulation. So what we just read is that we have a period now of martyrdom that occurs after uh, uh, the time of Commodus and entering the time of Diocletian. So we'll see a lot of tribulation. That's why I believe that the Great Tribulation began as soon as Christianity, as soon as Messiah resurrected from the dead. That's when the tribulation began. So what do you get here when you go through and read it? I mean, we kind of talked about it, but
All right, let me see if I can get this. The Lamb opened the fifth seal. I saw the altar, the souls of those who have been slain for the word of God, the testimony they had upheld. I'm not sure what the altar would be there.
yeah. So he's seeing this heavenly vision. So he's like this heavenly altar.
Okay, so it is an altar in heaven.
Yeah.
Well, it could be
Yeah.
what you
So there.
mentioned, the bad emperors taking people out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's take a look now in history and see what happened during this time. So this is 303 to 313, a 10-year period. So these had been slain by the fourth beast kingdom, Rome, for the word of God and for the testimony they had upheld. Now, this is God's commandments, and the testimony is referring to Yeshua. And we see this phraseology mirrored in Revelation 12:17, where it says that Satan is coming against those who keep the commands of God and hold to the testimony of Yeshua. So the martyrs described here are Christians slain by Rome, and not referring to saints of old before the time of Yeshua and the fourth beast of Rome. So you can go back and see that this fifth seal corresponds to the last 10 years of the Smyrna age, if you want to take a look at that, where it says they will suffer tribulation for 10 days. Now, it's not to say that those martyred before Yeshua don't count, but this is specifically talking about those martyred for their testimony and Christians during this time. So following the cross, the resurrection, and the ascension, Yeshua established his heavenly kingdom. It was at this time war broke out in heaven, and Satan was cast to the earth, where he has come down with great fury, knowing he only has a short time. Those who overcome and did not love their lives so as to shy away from death are promised white garments. We read this in Revelation 3 in one of the letters to the churches. So this corresponds here to the white robes that all martyred saints are given. We saw that. Oh, I didn't put the verse here. I don't have it. Okay. I'll pull it here. So each of them was given a white robe and told to rest a little while. So we saw that the white robes were for those who overcome. So those were for the martyred saints. Now these martyrs under the altar asked God how long until God will avenge their blood and judge those who dwell on the earth or in the Roman Empire. And they said, rest a little longer until the rest of your fellow servants, your brothers, were killed, just as they had been killed. So the fifth seal contains the last 10 years of martyrdom, or a little longer, until the final persecution under pagan Rome would cease, shortly be followed by the sixth seal, which would sequentially unravel the Roman Empire and deliver the head wound to the beast.
What's the head wound?
The head wound occurs in the final seal. So it's, I'm sorry, the final, the fourth trumpet, if I'm remembering correctly.
We'll get there, is what you're saying. Okay.
We'll get there, yeah. So
off topic, but what do you think about the souls under the altar, like in heaven? Do you think people go to heaven?
Good question. Like soul sleep versus
yeah.
So there's two ways. I mean, if you look at this as a picture symbolism, it doesn't require that these are living souls actually doing this action. It's just John given a vision of God basically hearing the prayers or the cries of the saints as they're martyred, right? In a sense, martyred, taking up their cross as Yeshua took up his cross, and so essentially laying their lives down on the altar, so there's the sacrificial altar, and then you have the incense altar of the prayers of the saints rising up to heaven.
Is that phrase under the altar used anywhere else?
That's a good question. So let's find out.
What does it mean to be under an altar? To be in the ashes? Because it would be like a grate, wouldn't it be? So you would, an animal,
like ashes.
Ashes would fall through and into the fire, essentially.
The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And it would be earth. It would be under the altar. So that's kind of the image I get, is that their blood is crying out.
Is in the ground.
The blood would even drip down. Yeah. That's just, without spending a lot of time on that, because I'm not prepared to really give you a deep answer on that, but I think it's a picture. And then, if we take it literally that there are these souls, like talking or crying out to God, it could potentially say something to the idea of, existing in heaven as a spiritual being. So I'm not going to take a strong position one way or the other on that. But to say that the what's described here is describing the period of time of the events that are occurring. So, but there are several periods of persecution under pagan Rome. I think some have listed up like 10 periods, but they include Nero, which was primarily in Rome, and his reign was 54 to 68. There was a generalized persecution under Marcus Aurelius. There was the Decian persecution in 250, which lasted 18 months. During that persecution, an edict was given requiring Christians to sacrifice to a pagan Roman god to demonstrate their oath of allegiance to the empire. So many were martyred, many apostatized, and many fled to Egypt, Africa, and Anatolia. Now, in 257, Valerian enacted deliberate persecution of Christians, but his son Gallienus ended the persecutions and brought about 40 years of liberty. And that leads us up to Diocletian. And he took the imperial throne in the eastern side, and his co-emperor Maximian in the western. They actually associated themselves with Jupiter and Hercules, and wanted to restore the golden age of Rome by restoring the traditional pagan cult of Rome and limiting any threat to their success. So they actually disagreed on how to deal with Christians. So what did they do? This is interesting. They consulted the oracle of Apollo at Didyma. And the oracle basically told them that exterminating the Christians was the answer. And that's what led to the Diocletianic persecution, the most intense persecution in the pagan Roman Empire. Now, what did these oracles, what did they do? Well, I don't know if I've talked about these oracles before, but you have several different oracles. Another one is the Sibylline oracles, or the oracles at Cybele. And these oracles were women who were deemed to have a special connection to one of these pagan deities like Apollo. And they would basically get high on fumes that come out of cracks in the earth. And so they would sit over these cracks, sniff these fumes.
I think I see a pagan goddess behind you right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, Izzy. So, and then you know what else they would do? They would start babbling, like speaking in tongues. And they would just say these wacky things, and then there would be someone that would interpret what they said and tell them what the oracle had spoken. All right, and if you want to have some fun, just go read like the Sibylline oracles and some of the things that they said. But yeah, so my point is that that's a great example to be careful with Christian mysticism that is promoting and pushing mystical experiences as if that's a sign of your relationship with God. Because guess what? The pagans did that kind of stuff too, and you don't know what you're messing with, and you got to be careful with that.
How dare you, Dan?
Exactly. I see people, just are very haphazard about that sort of stuff, and basically naming and claiming every thing that they see as a mystical experience as from God. And that's how our people think that they're hearing from God all the time. And they tell you that the fifth seal is, I don't know, some current headline. God told them so, right? Because it felt good. All right. So what they got from this was that they should kill all the Christians. All right, great idea, right? So this was the last and most severe persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. The edicts issued include imprisonment and forced pagan sacrifice. The fourth edict required all men and women and children to participate in a public pagan sacrifice or be executed. This persecution lasted for 10 years until the Edict of Milan was issued by Constantine and Licinius in 313. Yes.
Our Donald Trump.
Pretty much, yeah. So in 313, these guys signed this together. Now, Constantine and Licinius didn't really get along, but he was able to do this. So, here's what Wikipedia says about the Diocletian persecution. Is the empire's last, largest, and bloodiest official persecution of Christianity. And it failed to eliminate Christianity in the empire. After 324, Christianity became the empire's preferred religion under Constantine. Despite these failures and challenges, Diocletian's reforms fundamentally changed the structure of the Roman imperial government and helped stabilize the empire economically and militarily, enabling the empire to remain essentially intact for another 150 years, despite being near the brink of collapse in Diocletian's youth. So, these souls under the altar crying out, how much longer? How much longer? And God said, just a little while longer until the rest of your brothers have been martyred for their testimony. And now that seal has been opened and finished, and we're going to get to the sixth seal just after the Diocletianic persecution. So let's jump over to the sixth seal and see what it has to say for us. We're getting really close to finish up these seals here. Okay, so I saw the Lamb open the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake, and the sun became black like sackcloth of goat hair, and the whole moon turned red, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, like unripe figs dropping from a tree shaken by a great wind. The sky receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from its place. There's a lot of symbolism to look at here. Then the kings of the earth, the nobles, the commanders, the rich, the mighty, and every slave and free man hid in the caves among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us, and from the face of the one seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and he was able to withstand it.
I feel like this would have to be the battle of like Armageddon in the futurist perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, what's interesting is you have this thing where, the sun becomes black like sackcloth of goat hair, and the whole moon turned blood red, and all the stars of the sky fell to the earth. Now, if that is Armageddon for the futurist perspective, let me ask you this. So remember, this is the sixth seal that we see stars falling, sun becomes black, and moon turning red. Now let's go over just a couple of chapters. Let's see. Where would that take us? Fifth trumpet.
Just keep thinking about
Sixth
like
trumpet.
I even got into it. I first got into like keeping the feasts. You start reading about all the blood moons and all that.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh, it's coming, it's coming. No, it's not.
All right. Yeah, it's not the blood moons that we have here. All right. Here we go. So if that was Armageddon and the sun's doing this, it turned in black like sackcloth, moon's red, stars fall from the sky. Well, then what do we have here in the fourth trumpet? It says a third of the sun and moon and stars were struck. A third of the stars were darkened. A third of the day was out light, and a third of the night as well. Well, that kind of seems like the same event, like this scary, crazy celestial event where the sun and moon and stars are darkened, and so
How many
maybe
times
these
can
are
all the stars fall
symbolic.
from the sky?
Right. Well, they can happen a few times, as you can see. It's really the language of the prophets. If you just look over to the side here, you'll see it's in Isaiah 13, Ezekiel 32, Joel 2. All right, so now let's go back to Revelation 6, and we'll go through it and see what it could be. Now, for time's sake, I'm going to just give you right to the interpretive portion. So the sixth seal opens up. This is from 312 to 395. From basically the Edict of Milan giving peace to Christians after this time of persecution, up into Emperor Theodosius' death. It's a symbolic description of political upheaval in the current Roman Empire. So in 293, Diocletian had split the empire into two divisions, Eastern and Western, and he created the rule of four known as the Tetrarchy. So Diocletian ruled from the east as Augustus, with Galerian as his Caesar, and Maximian held the title of Augustus, with Constantius as Caesar in the west. So Diocletian limited the senatorial power to only that of Rome, thus eliminating the checks and balances to his imperial rule. And then the imperial court was moved from Rome to Asia Minor. And so basically the Byzantine side, the eastern side of the empire, became the seat of power and reduced power in the western. Constantine became emperor in 306, and his army named him Augustus. So they were saying, you are Augustus, you are the prime emperor here. So there were at least 6 people claiming control of the West, but he won. He crossed the Alps, invaded Italy with his army, and at the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312, he won. And here's what happens is he says, the day before this battle, Constantine claimed to have seen a vision of a cross of light in the sky with this inscription, in hoc signo vinces, or in this sign conquer. And he had a dream that night instructing him to carry the sign of the cross into battle. So exchange the old battle emblems with the Christian symbol. And this has been reported to be Constantine's conversion to Christianity. However, others report his conversion and baptism occurred shortly before his death in 337. So for fun, I'm going to just pull up and show
Doing a lot of things for fun tonight.
Constantine's cross. There we go. There's the Cairo.
The Cairo, yeah. Or whatever you say.
Yeah, exactly. So there you have it. I guess there's probably different versions.
Back when I was in college, it was cool to get a Cairo tattoo. I almost got one.
Oh, yeah.
Glad I didn't.
So, yeah, so there's your... Anyways, that's just a fun history there. But so when he won this battle, he established a truce with Licinius in the east, and he signed the Edict of Milan. And then what this did was it provided religious freedom for all faiths, but particularly the Christians, because it ended the Diocletianic persecution. Now, this truce eventually broke down because Licinius didn't like the Christians, and so Constantine defeated him and then became sole ruler over the empire and reunited it under his rule. And he completely restructured the empire. You'll see a restructuring, same kind of restructuring happening in the trumpet that we just looked at, that had the same kind of effect on the sun and moon and stars. Okay? So that is pointing to restructuring of an empire. And we'll get to that when we get to it, but these two are connected in that way. They both have a restructuring of the empire. So he built the city of Byzantium, which he named Constantinople, moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople, and built Christian churches, pagan temples. A lot of the pagan temples he converted, and a lot of pagan idols he converted to Christian images. He erected statues of previous emperors, including himself. Not a very Christian thing to do. Despite claims that he was truly converted, he maintained the pagan symbols of Sol Invictus and Mars on his coins. He was not a Christian. The central seat of power was effectively moved from Rome to Constantinople in the eastern half, which is the eastern foot of Daniel's statue, going back to Daniel 2. So 325, he organized the Council of Nicaea, where Christianity was defined and Arianism was condemned. In 326, he had his own son executed based upon false accusations of adultery, and he died the next year in 337. So Constantine never made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. But he did ban pagan sacrifices, ritual prostitution, crucifixion, and gladiatorial contest. So what it did was he created the culture for Christianity to begin to thrive and flourish and obtain power. So now this is described as an earthquake, the sun becoming black, moon turning red, stars falling from the sky. So let's just break this down and go through it. Earthquakes represents a shaking of political structures, like shaking the fig tree. The fig tree can represent a nation and its leadership, just like Yeshua used the fig tree imagery when he pronounced judgment on the nation of Judah. Luke 13 and Matthew 11. We won't go there. When Nahum pronounced judgment on Nineveh, he compared the military fortresses of Nineveh to fig trees. All your fortresses are fig trees. When shaken, they fall down in the mouth of the eater. So, 2 stars falling from the sky are likened to the fig tree, meaning the stars also represent leaders, politicians, and military commanders. So now we're seeing the image falling. These stars falling are talking about leaders, politicians, and military commanders falling or losing their power or position. So when Yeshua talks about how we could command a mountain to be thrown into the sea, you can understand now Yeshua was talking about uprooting and overcoming nations and kingdoms and political structures of the world, because mountains represent kingdoms. Hills represent seats of government authority. So he's telling us that by faith, we're enabled to withstand the powers of the current world system, and one day we'll overtake them, we'll rule them, but not that we can have these telekinetic powers, right? If we just pray hard enough, right? That we can actually pick up a mountain and move it into the sea. Yeah, so this is just the scripture where he says that. We'll skip over that. So mountains and islands being moved refers to upheaval and restructuring of the Roman Empire and its client states, which is what happened during Constantine's time. Now, the sun becoming dark means it has lost its power and efficacy. It's symbolic for a king losing his position and power. The moon turning to blood has been used to depict judgment and a bad omen for nations or empires. The same symbolism is found in Isaiah. So you see in Isaiah 13:10 when they talk about the judgment of Babylon, Ezekiel 36 or 32 concerning Egypt, and Amos 8:9 concerning Israel, and Matthew 24 concerning Judah. So the same type of language was used in events that have already happened. So we know it's not actually stars falling out of the sky and the sun losing its power. It's referring to symbolism for political upheaval. Joseph's dream is a great example, because he says the sun, moon, and stars bow down to him, yet we know that they were symbolic of his mom, his dad, and his brothers. Okay, it's a family affair. The same type of language for mountains falling or melting, the sky being rolled away as a scroll, the stars falling and the figs falling, have already occurred in history, as was recorded in Isaiah 34 concerning judgment upon Edom, which was fulfilled in the 5th century when the Nabateans drove them out. So, Isaiah 34, 3 and 5, just to show you. Oops, I made a mistake there. There we go. So, their slain will be left unburied, and the stench of the corpses will rise. The mountains will flow with their blood. All the stars of heaven will be dissolved. The skies will be rolled up like a scroll, and all their stars will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like foliage from the fig tree. All right? This is a prophecy of what would happen, and it was referring to what happened in the 5th century to Edom. So if this language means all the stars will actually fall out of the sky, like a futurist will say, then please explain to me how that happened in the 5th century BC. Okay? So yeah, it's getting a little late, so we should probably maybe finish up with the 6th seal and pick up from there next time. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, so
I like those connections.
yes, lots of connections there. And since we're going to finish up, I mean, we might as well just prove it we'll go to Isaiah 13:10 and just drive this home. Isaiah 13, okay, a burden against Babylon. And we'll go to verse 10. The day of the Lord is coming. We talked about how there are many of those, makes the earth a desolation. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The rising sun will be darkened. The moon will not give its light. By the way, when the moon turns to blood, it's red. That's an eclipse. It means it's actually dimmed. So this is another way of saying the moon being red is another way of saying it doesn't give its light. It's obscured in some way. So stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. So this happened to Babylon. It happened to Egypt, Ezekiel 32, 6 through 8.
And these are literal things, not like the stars falling from heaven.
Yeah, in other words, the stars falling from heaven are not literal, they're symbolic. And we're proving that because we can see that this happened in the history.
No, what you're talking about in Isaiah now is something something we can observe in stellarium.
Yeah, we know that stuff didn't happen. Like, there's no recorded events of the stars leaving, like actually falling out of the sky or, whatever. So
We're not missing any stars in the constellations. We got them all.
right.
Okay.
Yes, we got them all. I will, when I extinguish you, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud. The moon will not give its light. The shining lights in the heavens I will darken over you, bring darkness upon your land. The point God is saying is that it's going to be bad for you. It's going to be doom and gloom, So he's using language to say that. And you see it happen in Amos 8:9 with Israel. So in Matthew 24 with Judah. So, this idea of the sky being rolled away to the scroll was used in Isaiah 34. Yet for some reason, when we read it in Revelation, we think it's this novel event that we should look to we're going to look up. And I caught this on Facebook Live. Look, the sky's, it's rolling away like a scroll. This is the the sixth seal, No, that's not what it's talking about. It's just using symbolic language. Still with me?
Yes. I was thinking about the scroll in Zechariah, but I don't think it's.
Oh yeah,
relevant.
Different scroll. Mm-hmm.
I think it is a scroll in the sky, but it's an actual scroll. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, little book or something. All right, so the kings of the earth, commanders, rich, mighty, hid in the caves, the rocks and mountains. So now this language was used as well in prophesying about Edom's judgment when Jeremiah said that I will strip Esau bare, I will uncover his hiding places, and he will be unable to conceal himself. At the sound of their fall, the earth will quake. So earthquake, people are trying to hide in the rocks. It's saying there's political upheaval and people are trying to escape being judged or punished. I mean, if you know that there's a new emperor in town and your spot is up for grabs, you better run and tuck tail because they're probably going to come for you, especially if you weren't on his side. The same biblical language is used for the judgment of Edom and many other nations in regard to judgment poured out upon imperial pagan Rome and the sixth seal. Same thing with the remaining seals and trumpets. Constantine was used by God to bring judgment and terror upon the current state of pagan Rome, causing many of the former rulers to flee into hiding. During his tenure, Constantine successfully fended off the barbarian raids. God also used Constantine to bring about the end of the Diocletianic persecution and usher in a short period of peace and tranquility for Christians. So,
just because God used him doesn't mean he's Christian, though.
Right. Just like God used many others. So he brought this period of peace and tranquility. And here's an ancient coin minted during his reign. So in the front, it's got Constantine, and the back says blessed tranquility. So there you have it. Constantine, blessed tranquility. So this wasn't the end of the beast by any means. Constantine retained the title Pontifex Maximus. He was not a Christian, which continued in use by the popes of the Roman papacy. So he kind of set the groundwork for interweaving the Roman Empire with the Roman Catholic Church.
Can't beat them, join them.
Right. He did have Sunday laws. People say that Constantine changed the Sabbath to Sunday. He did not. I want to tell you what his Sunday laws did. Okay. What they were intended to do was promote veneration of the sun. They were sun god worship. He did not mention the Lord's Day, and he encouraged farmers to continue working on Sunday. So here's what he said: "Let all the magistrates and common people and all the offices of the arts rest on the venerable day of the sun. Yet in the country they should serve freely and freely to the cultivation of the fields, since it often happens that the grain of the furrows or the vineyard is not more suitable on another day than is recommended for the dregs, lest on an important occasion the convenience granted by the heavenly provision should be lost." So what he's saying here is, if you live in town, if you're an artist, if you're a magistrate, a common person, rest on Sunday, the venerable day of the sun. Okay? But in the country, you should continue to cultivate your fields, because it's probably maybe one of the best days that you're going to be able to get out there and do it. So don't worry about that. So this had nothing to do with the Sabbath. This had just simply to do with venerating the sun. So you tell me what's worse, but it's important we're careful to not place blame where it's not due, because clearly it was the Roman Catholic Church that did away with Sabbath and replaced it with Sunday. But Constantine set the stage for that sort of thing to happen by starting to mix paganism with Christianity.
Reminds me of what you said last time about like Balaam told Balak how to beat Israel. And I guess the Romans had to figure out the same thing with the Christians. Like, you just got to get them to sin.
Yeah.
And this is how you get them to sin, by not keeping the Sabbath and stuff like that. And they bring judgment on themselves. And you don't have to destroy them and hunt them down. And God will do it.
Right. So, yeah. So this period enacted I'm going to finish with this, a transfer of power to what would eventually become Papal Rome, and ushering this time of apostasy mentioned in 2 Thessalonians 2:3. It's consistent with the Pergamum church age, if we want to go back and look at that. But before the evolution fully occurred into Papal Rome, you're going to see the seven trumpets poured out, and the saints of God sealed for protection before these seven trumpets are poured out. Now, the Huns are part of those seven trumpets, so we're going to get to them. Hopefully, it takes a while to get through all seven of the trumpets, but maybe next time we'll be able to get to the Huns.
We got to keep the episodes rolling. So
yeah, we are. So I'll finish with this. What was it? 2 Thessalonians that I said? 2:3. Just to bring that up is.
Cats are getting restless. I hear them.
They are. You can hear them. Let no one deceive you in any way, for the day of the Lord will not come until the rebellion occurs, and the man of lawlessness, the son of destruction, is revealed. He will oppose and exalt himself above every so-called God or object of worship, and seat himself in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. So we're going to get to this point where we see this man proclaiming himself to be God appear and seating himself in the temple of God, the seat, the vicar of Christ, so to say. But there has to be a rebellion that occurs, and then the son of destruction is rebelled. So we should see an apostasy. We should see the true faithful church start to join with paganism and apostatize from the true faith and create something different.
Yes.
Awesome. So hopefully we covered a good chunk. Any concerns, questions, or recaps for tonight?
I'm ready for bed. It was good.
Me too, buddy. Well, next time we'll get into the 144,000 sealing, and then we'll get into the trumpets.
It'll take me a good listen or two to fully comprehend, but that was good.
All right. Awesome, man. I enjoyed it. Well, thanks, buddy. You get some good rest, and we'll chat soon.
Yes, sir. Good night to Ozzy and Izzy. Right?
Yeah.
Izzy and Ozzy?
Izzy and Ozzy. You got it.
Got it.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Take care. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Pharisee Heresy.